war that has entered its second month. And now Donald Trump's war in Iran seems to have restricted itself to a single point, the Strait of Hormuz. POTUS can flaunt bunker buster strikes or Isfahan. He can talk tough about wanting a deal through his War Secretary Pete Hegseth's bluster, but he just cannot reopen the one strait that powers 20% of the world's fuel. Iran is sitting on that lever and it has decided to turn it into a toll booth. Iran is not blinking or backing down. It is disrupting shipping lines, it is hitting oil targets and is flatly rejecting America's terms. Adding to Trump's frustration is the rejection by global powers. Spain has blocked America's access to its bases for war strikes. UK and France are pushing back despite facing the president's taunts and wrath and snide remarks. So, all in all, the war that was projected as epic fury 1 month later is looking like Donald Trump's epic failure.
On the Strait of Hormuz, there are many more vessels flowing through today than there were, as the president has arranged. The president's been clear to Iran, open it for business, or we have options, and we certainly do. Iran is wise. They will cut a deal. President Trump doesn't bluff, and he does not back down.
با توجه به شرارت‌ها و اقدامات تروریستی دشمنان آمریکایی صهیونیستی و هدف قرار دادن منازل مسکونی مردم ایران در شهرهای مختلف، نیروهای مسلح جمهوری اسلامی ایران در اقدامی تلافی جویانه محل سکونت فرماندهان و مسئولان سیاسی آمریکا و رژیم صهیونیستی در منطقه و سرزمین‌های اشغالی را
Thank you very much, Sir Richard, for speaking to us here on the Newshour on Times Now. America now has 57,000 troops at the very least in different parts of the Middle East, which is typically almost 15 to 20,000 more than they usually have in this region. What are they planning? Are they planning some kind of a limited interventions on the ground in Iran? How do you read their strategy of boots on the ground?
I'm absolutely certain that America is preparing for some sort of ground operation. Whether they choose to go that far, of course, remains to be seen. But everything to me points towards a ground operation. Everything to me points towards increased escalation. And I think the target must be the Strait of Hormuz and an attempt to open it up.
So what specifically are we looking at? A takeover of the Kurg Island, or will it be an attempt to extract Iran's enriched uranium that has been indicated on several occasions? What do you think it is?
Clearly, I don't think anybody knows at this stage. I think all these options are probably on the table. I would point out, though, that Kurg Island, of course, it's one thing to launch an operation to secure it. But you can only do that with airborne forces, because the Americans are not going to be able to launch an amphibious operation on Kurg Island until the Strait of Hormuz has been opened up. So they've got a problem there. You mentioned the Iranian operation. Now, that is a real challenge. I mean, a very difficult, very dangerous and complex operation, which would involve putting really quite significant troops on the ground in the vicinity of the uranium and before extracting it. So all these are very, very complex, very, very difficult operations.
So let me ask you, we've been receiving mixed signals, to put it mildly, from the United States. Trump one day says this war will last 4 to 6 weeks in total, and we are already approaching the 5th week now. But then he's also building up American troop presence in the region. There are also reports that claim that America's Middle Eastern allies want Trump to finish the job. Where is all of this headed for all our viewers who want to know which way life is taking us?
Well, I 100% agree with you. The objectives have been unclear. Trump has flip-flopped between unconditional surrender, regime change, removal of nuclear weapons. There has been no clarity on how this war ends. And that is all really bad news, because it says to me this thing could run and run and run. I take your point about the Gulf states wanting him to finish it quickly. And I don't blame them, because they've been hammered by the Iranians in response to the American-Israeli attack. But it's easier said than done. The truth is that while the Iranians hold the Strait of Hormuz, Trump is losing, and America is losing this. How do you finish it quickly? Well, there's no quick end to this. The only way to open up the Strait of Hormuz would be to control significant amounts of Iranian territory, because even if the Americans put troops onto the littoral, onto the coastline or the islands on the northern side of the Strait of Hormuz, the Iranians will still be able to launch drones from many, many miles, kilometers inland over the heads of the Americans on the coastline to hit the shipping, to hit any shipping going through. So what? So the only way you can do that is to advance for many, many kilometers inland to occupy it. And even then, that is a complex, difficult, dangerous task requiring hundreds of thousands of troops, which America's not got yet in theater. So I don't see any immediate end to this except one, and that is that Trump backs down, negotiates, and of course he will be negotiating from a position of weakness, despite the fact that America is the global superpower. The Iranians have got the upper hand. They have literally got Trump over a barrel. So it's negotiation, back down, and ultimately humiliation.
Well, what can the 57,000 strong troops actually achieve in Iran on the ground? The invasion of Iraq in 2003, you would recall, Sir Richard, required more than 2.5 lakh troops. Israel mobilized nearly 300,000 troops before invading Gaza. The war in Afghanistan required more than 100,000 troops to begin with. So what are these 57,000 troops on the ground likely to achieve?
I think the most realistic operation is an operation to try and open up the straits for a limited period of time to allow some shipping through. I don't think Karg Island is a realistic operation because of the difficulty. It's one thing to put airborne troops in. It's another thing completely. Airborne troops are light, designed for in-out coup de main operations. Airborne troops stuck on the ground without heavy weapons, without maybe much heavy capability, will find it very difficult. And as I said, I think the uranium operation is a forlorn hope. So I think the most likely is an operation to open up the Strait of Hormuz. But I stress that it's one thing to open the Strait of Hormuz, quite another to hold them open for long periods of time, which would require significant forces, significant troops, both along the coastline and for many, many miles inland.
Well, so to just build on that, for America to hold the Straits of Hormuz open will take long, and would it presumably also mean taking a lot of casualties, even if it is a limited operation? And there's already so much pushback in the United States against Trump's war. Will he take that risk given his popularity ratings, which are diving downwards?
I fear you're right. I think, inevitably, in a war like this, the Iranians, I think we have to assume, will fight very hard, and they will be determined to kill as many Americans or take as many Americans prisoner as possible. So I fear for the lives of many of these young Marines, sailors, and airmen and women who I think are likely to be committed by a commander-in-chief who is going to sacrifice them fundamentally for a hubristic, badly thought-through plan.
Well, but does the US find itself isolated in NATO? France, Spain, Italy have all refused to permit American jets to use their airspace for any operations vis-a-vis Iran. Trump has spoken of his frustration with NATO, and Marco Rubio has spoken of recalibrating America's position in NATO after this war ends. Where is this headed?
Well, America had recalibrated its position regarding NATO well before this operation was launched. It started with Hegseth and Vance announcing at the beginning of last year that America would not underwrite European security, thereby effectively undermining the whole principle of NATO's doctrine of collective defense. And while I appreciate the thinking behind that the Europeans should do more, which they absolutely should do, then if you add to that the fact that 2 months ago, Trump himself threatened to attack the territory of a NATO ally, Denmark, over Greenland, and the constant barrage of denigration, insults and abuse which has come from Trump to NATO allies, it's hardly surprising that, frankly, Europeans do not trust America led by Trump. Trump is not seen as an ally. He is seen as a predator and a bully. So it's no surprise that NATO has said, no, that we're not going to get in this operation. NATO is not designed to support an offensive operation, an offensive war launched with no cause for self-defense. Arguably against Charter, Article 51 of the UN Charter. And I think the attitude will be very much, you broke it, you fix it. We're not going to get involved with you. And I think NATO is absolutely right to keep the Americans at arm's length here.
Absolutely, considering there is no end game in mind, no decided objectives. But let me ask you, what do you make of how Iran has responded? And is this a strategic defeat for Trump if there is a cessation of hostilities announced soon? He has eliminated Iran's leadership, he has inflicted casualties, but in terms of achievement of objectives, what's the verdict?
Well, as I said earlier, so long as Iran is holding the Strait of Hormuz, America is losing. If America walks away, if Trump backs down, it will be a strategic victory for Iran over the United States, and it will be a defeat for the United States. They have launched a war with different aims, as we've discussed. They have written down Iranian military capability massively through their industrial scale aerial assault bombing alongside the Israelis. But the fact is, Iran still has capability, as they're demonstrating very effectively by launching missiles and drones at American forces based in Saudi Arabia, causing casualties and damaging aircraft, and indeed the wider Gulf region. So the Iranians still have capability, and of course, don't forget, they are being supplied by Russia, which is providing drones as well as targeting information. But if America has to back down and America walks away, Iran is the victor. I can't see any other way of describing it.
So what in the name of God was this entire military operation stroke war all about? Well, the world is asking those questions, but Pete Hegseth just gave a detailed press conference earlier today. He claimed that he senses an urgency to finish the job and that America has successfully set the terms in 1 month. What's your reading of that claim made by Pete Hegseth?
Well, I don't know what Pete Hegseth is smoking. But I think it's fantasy land. As I say, while Iran holds the Strait of Hormuz, America is losing. And I think Hegseth probably better recognize that.
Well, Iran has said that they have not been negotiating with the United States, even as Trump claims otherwise. Once again, there's a direct contradiction. Are the Iranians and Trump even talking? What's the truth on that? Any guesses, sir?
Well, I think the noise we're getting out of Washington, frankly, about about these talks, I wouldn't trust 1 minute for one instance. I don't think we can believe anything that comes out of Trump's mouth. As for the Iranians, well, you're right. They've been absolutely consistent that there are no negotiations going on. I don't trust Iran either. I think the Iranian regime is a vicious, vile regime. You only have to look and see what it did to thousands of its people back in January who protested against the regime. They were massacred, but they have continued to be consistent. They may or may not be. There may or may not be talks. There are clearly messages being passed backwards and forwards through other intermediaries, but I don't think that amounts to meaningful negotiation. And it's no surprise because at the moment, of course, Iran does not need to negotiate. They're holding the vital ground, which is the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, as the entire world watches us in exasperation on which way this war is going, the situation gets more and more puzzling and convoluted with each passing hour. We're waiting, and as is the rest of the world, on a hope and a prayer that these hostilities come to an end sooner than later. But thank you very much, Sir Richard, for joining me on the Newshour tonight. Viewers, thank you very much for being with me on the Newshour tonight. Good night, be safe. I'll be back tomorrow.